Let freedom ring have to do with a French king and a very brave surgeon? Well, to find out, you're going to have to follow along. Tune in, buckle up, Buttercup. Today we're talking butt stuff. Hey, I'm Dr. Anna Toker, your friendly neighborhood colorectal surgeon. And it's Independence Day, July 4th. I want to bore you guys with a lecture on anatomy and physiology. Let's find something fun. To do that, we're going to have to go all the way back to France in 1682. Yeah, I know you're thinking you're not interested in history. But it's an interesting story, and it does tie together with American history, shockingly enough. And it has nothing to do with Louisiana. In the same period of time, Louisiana was being claimed by Iberville and Bienville, and that is not the story I'm here to tell you. I want to talk about King Louis XIV, the Sun King, the one and only, the longest reigning French king. And he had a very peculiar problem on his hands in 1682, in that he had been living sort of a life of extravagance. Of course, he's a king. I mean, He also was a little bit holier than thou in that he would persecute, really, Protestants and other non-Catholics because he believed his monarchy was destined by God and that he was acting on behalf of the faith. And so he had a tendency to claim superiority in his morals. Now, you should never do that. And Louis XIV is probably a prime example. He was riddled with health illnesses and health problems, including a very embarrassing problem called an anal abscess and fistula. He kept getting a recurrent boil on his hiney. Now, I know, it doesn't sound like it has anything to do with American history or with Super Patch, who does sponsor this content, and we will get there. Today's Super Patch is going to come to you by the Freedom Patch and, naturally, the Liberty Patch. We'll get to those in just a moment. But first, let's do the fun part. Poor Louis XIV. His little hiney is in a bindy. What are you going to do? He'd been telling everyone that they were, less than holy, and he was destined by God to be this great person, and yet he had a infirmity that at the time was thought to be brought upon by poor moral conviction. They didn't realize that this could happen to anybody. They thought your illness, the more embarrassing the illness, the more likely it was that you had an immorality about you. So, of course, he could not admit that he had this problem, yet he was quite sick because of it. Because the circle of people that he surrounded himself with also believed you were of poor moral character to have an anal complaint. The doctor to the king himself would not take care of the king. So here he is, the most powerful man probably in the world at the time. And certainly in France, obviously, he's the king. He's in a bind. So he winds up sending for help out into the city, find a surgeon who's willing to care for this particular problem. And they found a surgeon. Now, this particular, and at the time, you have to understand, in the late 1600s, physicians were separate from surgeons. It would probably take another 100 years before they would combine these two things into colleges of both physicians and surgeons. They were considered two separate entities. The surgeons fell into the barber category, right? cut your hair, trim your nails, drain your abscesses, remove foreign objects, pull your teeth. When they were hygiene people, physicians were above the hygiene thing. They were more the intellectual pursuit, right? So the physicians, A, did not know what to do about this particular problem, and B, believed it was a moral calamity. So the king goes out looking for a surgeon, and he found one, brave enough to treat the king, understanding that if he were to fail, there would be a high price to pay. He was confident. He had seen this problem. He was a learned man, and not all surgeons were actually at the time, but this one actually was, and claimed that he could help the king with this particular problem. Now, this surgeon had a mortality rate. Mortality rate means how many people die after he operates on them. He had a mortality rate of 75%. Okay, so he's got a mortality rate of 75%. And I guess he's banking on, I'm either going to kill the king, I might get credit for that by the person next in line, or I'll save the king. Now, the price for this surgery was 10,000 pieces of gold, okay? And at the time, that was a treasure trove. I mean, okay, for reference, that's 20 times more than what I get paid now, assuming that a piece of gold now is $1, right? So $10,000 at the time is now millions and millions and millions of dollars. So this king gave this surgeon, who killed most of his patients, millions of dollars to proceed with this operation. Okay. I know you're wondering, what the hell does it have to do with American history? Happy Independence Day, by the way. All right. The story continues. Okay. So the doctor comes to the king's place, examines the king, confirms this is truly a fistula, what we call a fistula. It is, this is more of a Tushy Tuesday concept, and I understand it is Thursday, but so the king has a fistula, and again, being a surgeon taking care of common people, he realizes this is not an uncommon problem. In fact, it's one of the earliest surgeries ever described, removing a stone from the gallbladder and fixing an anal fistula. Those are the two very, very early surgeries described by Hippocrates. And this surgeon knew that, and he knew exactly how Hippocrates fixed these fistulas. And so therefore, he decides to fix the fistula. Now, they have no anesthesia. The king is not exactly going to cotton to the sort of torture that you can do to a layperson out in the street. So this surgeon spends 2 months creating just the right instruments to do this operation. He envisions what he's going to do. He's examined the king. He already knows, kind of. So it's got to be quick, because it certainly is not going to be painless. He preps the area with something called a ceton. And we still use cetons to this day, actually. It is simply a filament. At the time, they would have used horsehair or something non-dissolvable. A reed of some sort that's flexible that you can tie into a knot. Step 1 is to drain the abscess, find the tract, pull a non-dissolvable string or suture or something to that effect through this tract, and then tie it down. It keeps the tract open and lets the abscess heal. Causes some scar tissue in the meantime, and it preps the area for the second part of the surgery, which is going to have to be to unroof the rest of this fistula. Okay. So in the 2 months that the surgeon is making this, he's making a special scalpel and a special guide. He's practicing this. I don't know on whom, and I don't know how. It's not important. His life is on the line. Like, he's operating like he means it, okay? This is the kind of surgeon you want. He's highly motivated, not by the income, but so he doesn't die. Okay. Meanwhile, the king has this pestilent pus draining from his bottom. The surgeon has told him to keep it covered with a very particular bandage that he was going to have to wear all the time. I don't know if you've seen pictures of Louis XIV. He was really kind of fancy, right? This did not go with fancy garb. But he starts wearing the fancy dressing. And of course, the people of France, eager for the new fashion claim, started wearing very similar garments out of fashion. Like, look back in the 1680s at pictures of fashion, and you will see people wearing what look like padded diapers. And you're thinking, how the hell did that ever become fashion? The king made it fashionable because he had an ass problem that he was wearing a surgical bandage. Okay, anyway, I digress. Okay, meanwhile, so Louis XIV is now, a fashion guru. He really has kind of turned the tide. He went from embarrassing ailment of moral discrepancy, you know what I'm saying? And he turned it into a fashion thing. Vive la France, you know what I'm saying? So meanwhile, here comes a surgeon. He does a surgery, he does it quick, he does it efficiently. It takes another couple of months for this thing to heal. It heals, and it never comes back. Okay, now this is how we get involved with what does America have to do with this? America is just the colonies at this point in time. In fact, my family can be traced back to the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the late 1600s, coming from England. This is the same period of time. Louisiana, as an area, was being claimed by the French at that time. Right? So this is how long ago we're talking. Well, the king, to celebrate, first of all, he gives this surgeon just bucket load of gold. Number one. Number two, he commissions a musician to write a symphony, essentially, to celebrate the event. The symphony then was going to be very publicly performed. Now, at the time, and I am no historian, I do find it fascinating that for all of the back and forth between France and England, they were adversaries, and then they were friends, and then they were adversaries. The French had universities before the British did, and so noblemen in England oftentimes traveled to France. There was a lot of back and forth between culture and the people, and the educated people in particular. And so during this very public symphony, there were some British noblemen there. They hear this song and they're just mesmerized by it. They ask permission of the King of France. Can we please present this to the King of England? We think he will love this song. And Louis gives them permission. Okay. So now Louis XIV, he's living high on the hog. The King of England is now excited about his musical endeavors. The people of France are wearing their little butt diaper things in public. I still find that hysterical. And you truly can see renderings of that particular fashion. And anyway, so these gentlemen bring it back to the King of England, who falls in love with this song, so much so that he makes it the official anthem of England. So the English national anthem, when it plays, and anytime you hear it play, you'll recognize the day. If you're an American, you'll recognize the tune, because at the end of each verse, they sing God Save the King, while we say, let freedom ring. So, my country, 'tis of thee. And we sing this as children, and you'll hear it in the public spaces, is actually a tribute to the repair of an anal fistula of King Louis XIV in 1862. And that is how the French king comes to influence American history. Now, I find it fascinating that the Americans, when they were leaving England, and they decided on this very day in 1776, when they decide to write their Declaration of Independence, as part of a protest, they were taking very, very sensitive public treasures of the king and turning them into their own anthems. And this is one of them. They were not about to say, God save the king, but they did say, let freedom ring. And so let's now talk about Super Patch. We've got liberty and we've got freedom, and I thought those were appropriate on a day like today. How do these patches work? And I want to thank Super Patch for, even on this holiday, support our channel by paying for these lectures, and they give me some freedom, so to speak, to present interesting content in the context of their product. The beauty of our nation, and what makes it sort of the beacon of the free world, of the entire world, is that good ideas in competition with other good ideas naturally selects for the best ideas. And necessity is the mother of invention. And these patches fall into necessity is the mother of invention. And this is the beauty of our country, in that we attract some of the smartest people from around the world. Some of the greatest inventors are actually Scottish, that came to America in the 17 and 1800s. And really, a lot of our great inventions that Americans take credit for are truly Scottish nationals that moved to America. So we have a great history of claiming as our own individuals who want to pursue their own freedoms. And so this patch, the inventor is not American, he's Canadian, but he does make this product in America using American manufacturing, and a lot of his company is based out of America. He named these patches Freedom, as in freedom from pain. It's also free from all drugs. It's also free from all risk of addiction or complication. It can be used in any person at any age, and it improves pain when applied as close to the painful area as humanly possible. And about 80% of the level of your pain can improve within minutes of applying this patch. Now, I have some patients who say it helps instantly and removes the pain completely. Most people will notice that if they use it all day, every day in the area that hurts over the course of a 4 or 5 day period of time, they're using 80% fewer medications. There are several clinical trials done out of the University of Miami which show that data, and they do have this published to their website, which is superpatch.com. So check that out. It's fascinating. It is that research study that sort of interested me in this technology. And then I got to know the creator of the devices and his company, and he's a fascinating fellow. If you can follow anything on Jay Dhaliwal, I think you'll find he's a very brilliant person, and truly wants to help the world. And I think this mentality, not throwing medicines at a problem once it has occurred, but rather help the body heal itself by returning normal neurologic pathways to homeostasis. So your brain, when it gets out of whack, has a hard time focusing and controlling certain physiologic pathways, and these patches help your brain get back to normal so your body has its best chance of healing itself. So these patches don't cure any disease. They simply improve your body's ability to cure itself. The Liberty patch, show that, looks like that, improves vagus nerve and parasympathetic homeostasis, which are centered very deep in the brain, right next to the cerebellum. So this patch captures cerebellar activity, and the cerebellum is responsible for balance. And so the Liberty patch is an extremely good day-to-day use for overall health, especially as we get older, because balance is one of those things we lose as we get older. So this is liberty to move around without so much fear. If you've ever met somebody who's in their 70s, 80s, 90s, they get a little nervous walking around because they know their balance is not the greatest. This can help some of that balance. It's not going to turn them into a ballerina, for goodness sakes, but can help balance. And we are in the process of setting up a clinical trial to see if it will help sick people with their balance, not just healthy people. So check out superpatch.com. Many thanks to them. Happy Independence Day. I know you feel all much more cultured knowing the history of my country. 'Tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Let freedom ring, everybody. And if you're in England, God save the king. I'm not opposed to saying that. Hope you guys have a good 4th of July.